I was just going to leave it like that for a while.
That's fine.
Like I couldn't figure out what I was doing under here. So it's kind of like, well, I'll just leave that there. You know, I have on my political animal shirt this morning, so I'm ready to go.
You're always ready. When are you not ready?
I don't know. I'm starting to feel my age, I guess. So a little more than normal.
I don't know about that.
A little more than normal. So I'm going to be squeezed between the Grande brothers here today.
Yeah, it's double team. And you know what? We should have, after you put that title out on Uniform Commercial Code, we should have titled it just a little bit different, because it's really, yes, Uniform Commercial Code is part of it, but it's really about personal property more than anything.
Okay.
But it's all right. I didn't want to scare people off by just saying Uniform Commercial Code.
You didn't scare Lisa off.
Yeah, she's the best.
She is the best. And I did text the person I told you I was going to text, and she's unable.
Oh, dang.
I know. But that's okay. Well, she's watching. So that's the important thing. And she can always text me with things.
Yeah.
Whether or not she wants me to add her name to it or not. So what's up with you today, Miguel?
It's a lot of work. I just saw where, and this is going to kind of play into what we're going to talk about. I just got a headline here. And let me read it exactly. Okay. It says, Jay Powell, who's our Fed president of the private Federal Reserve Bank, who is our owners of the world. Right. He says Jay Powell made it clear Fed is not going to rescue the markets.
Oh, isn't that interesting?
So if things start going down here under President Trump, which there's a pretty good chance that they're going to let it, that's going to play right into what my deal is today that we're going to talk about with your personal property.
Okay, well, and we're also going to talk about higher education today.
Yeah, we're going to finish up with my brother, who was professor at Texas State. He came from Kansas State down to Texas State, and he was a professor down there during the first Trump administration.
Yeah.
And he's going to finish talking about the insanity. He lived in Austin, so that just adds to the left insanity. But we'll talk to him about some more higher education issues.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, let them sink. Then they'll know how real farmers and ranchers feel, who do not ask for every government handout that comes along. So yeah, if we get started on that today, I'm going to get so mad. My face is going to get red. And let's have Mark on first before I absolutely lose my nugget this morning. What if we do that? You want to pull on Mark?
Sure. You want me to get him? You want?
Well, whoops.
Same time.
We canceled you out. Sorry, Mark.
Good morning. I'll try not to get anybody else fired up today. We'll save that. We'll save that for you for later.
well, hey, go ahead, Jenny.
No, I was just going to say that's okay. I mean, this show is about getting fired up. It's just
there you go.
Yeah. Well, as a quick update, we had Mark on originally just to talk about the guy that got busted with James O'Keefe. What was his name, Mark? Travis Combs. Yeah. Yeah. Travis. Mm-hmm. Travis has resurfaced, Jenny, on the internet with his new pen name and going back into his craziness. You want to hit that real quick, Mark? Just tell us about Travis.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't even want to spend the energy on it, to be honest, in terms of reading his post.
No, you don't have to read it.
So no, I'm not going to. So basically, I was asking a friend about him. I was like, hey, did he just wipe his Facebook and this and that? Well, I guess he just made it he changed like kind of his name, different spellings to where it was, you couldn't like search and find him sort of, but it's still his profile. But anyways, he basically just had a huge long post like, to my friends and family, this is what happened. This was done out of confidence, and he was, it was basically just like he made himself become the victim, and so that it was just what what else are you going to expect from that type of individual that
He
can't
was
come to terms with
literally,
what they did. So yeah, he basically just made himself a victim in the post, and that this was done without me knowing and violated my trust and my rights and all those kinds of things. So and that basically what was he said in the interview wasn't true. So or taken out of context. That was
yeah,
kind of his post.
it's him talking, but it's taken out of context.
Yeah, exactly.
Remind everybody what this was about, in case they missed the last one.
Yeah, so it was just about them. I mean, the first bit of it was Doge was going in and auditing, the Department of Education, and they were all secretly communicating on Signal, trying to hide whatever it was they were doing. But thinking back to what James O'Keefe and them put up in that interview was of the likes that, they didn't care if people were illegal or not, and they were doing anything they could to get them in the process and take the funding and all the things. And I take free trips on the taxpayers' dollars and, a bunch of things like that. So it was just corruption, basically.
Corruption in the department. He worked in the Department of Education.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wait, hold on a second. So you're talking about that there's corruption in education?
No.
Oh, well, I was going to say I was shocked.
Yeah.
Shocked to hear something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about some stuff that happened to you when you were a professor originally, because you quit, didn't you?
I did. Yeah. So I went to graduate school there, and right after graduate school at Texas State, I became a department head in this department that was in the kinesiology division. And I taught there from 2011 to 2016, summer of 2016. And so I saw a pretty big transition in that point in time. And during that time, too, not only was I a teacher, but I hired and trained 14 graduate assistants that helped me teach a lot of these courses and stuff. So it wasn't just teaching. I was trying to mold, other young professionals that were, like me, trying to aspire to better things and stuff with being teachers. But, when I first started teaching there was never any type of this thought in the back of my mind or anything about, DEI and all that kind of stuff. It really wasn't until 2015 is where I started to have a trickling effect of students or the GAs that taught for me by, hey, Mark, I don't know what to do in this situation. I got this student sending me an email that just registered for my class that's saying I need to, call them by a specific name or gender or whatever. And all that was new, and that really didn't start happening until about 2015. And yeah, it was just a weird thing to go through culturally for me at that point in time. And it was kind of frustrating. And I was leaning on other professors that I knew that were more conservative and like, dude, what do I do in these situations? And we had to have meetings about it and stuff. And so in my mind, a lot of the culture shift started to happen in about 2015.
Well, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When all that, so from your point of view with the transition of that, it wasn't top down. It wasn't coming from the administrators in the college, pushing that type of ethos down. It was literally coming from like primary, secondary education kids from high school coming into college, kind of forcing that aspect into the colleges.
I feel like that's kind of where the genesis of it was, because I can't think back to any type of communication from like the provost or the department head or anybody like that, our chairs, saying, hey, this is what's happening. This is how we need to do things. I feel like the genesis of it, in my perspective, because it's been over 10 years, so recall on it, I'm just trying to do the best I can. But I feel like the genesis was specific students coming up to me and or my teachers via email or in person before class started to discuss like how they wanted to be told and talked to, and basically their expectation. So, did it come from parents that were a little bit more radical, and then that's kind of how they became, or like you said, was it from a lower education standpoint, and then that trickle up effect. I'm not too sure, but
What,
that,
what,
yeah,
what about when you were at K-State? I mean, did you see
nothing,
kind of all that
never,
craziness there at all?
not once, not, I
And
mean,
what
not
years were
ever.
what years were you there?
I was at K-State from 2008 to 2010.
Okay, well, this is kind of making some sense actually, because Lisa says they moved here in 2015 and they moved from California. And she said things started to change around there. And my last years in the 7th grade classroom were 2002. And part of the reason why my mom, because I taught with my mom, she taught English, I taught science. Part of the reason she retired and I left were because we had just seen the standards for behavior, for, I mean, everything. The parents were coming in and dictating essentially how we were able to teach the kids. And so that was in 2002. And this whole helicopter parent thing was just taking off then. Do you see what I did there? Helicopter taking off. Anyway,
Perfect.
that's what I like to hear. See, you need to do that, Michael. Your brother says perfect when I say something.
Yeah.
But no, in all seriousness, though, I mean, that seems to be, I know in 2002, we were already starting down that PC, you have to be super careful. You can't touch him. You can't do this. So we were already starting down that road in 2002. So I definitely think this is a bubble up.
Well, and here's the other thing too that I noticed that I think is worth noting too is, when I first started teaching there, communication with the students and just interaction in class, because all my classes were pretty small. I mean, I'm talking 20 to 30 people per classroom. And it was always a very interactive classroom because of the subject matter and what we used to do. But I felt like as the years kind of progressed towards 2015, 2016, it became increasingly harder to connect with the patients. Patients. I'm in healthcare now, so it's like I'm a mind on that. With the students, it became increasingly hard to connect with the students, especially in the beginning, like first week or two of class. And I really think that's because of the boom in social media and personal devices with cell phones and things. And so communication, like face to face, orally and all those things just became different. And then, could some of the trickle in effect, not only parents and lower education coming up, but also what was being pushed in terms of just socially on Instagram, Facebook, those kinds of things, because I think some of it came from there too, of students seeing like, oh, well, this person's identifying as this, that's how I feel like a victim or this or that. And so then they start to adopt that ideology too, because I think a lot of it is like a cult-like mentality, and they're seeing it on the Instagrams, and I got to live this way in this kind of life. And I think it really affected that generation of students a lot, because they grew up kind of with, media and a phone and those things, versus like, you talked about O2 and students. That was about when I was in 7th and 8th grade, if I kind of think back to it. And, I didn't even use a cell phone until I was late high school, early junior college.
Well, they were just coming in.
Exactly.
Then.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think as you kind of progress that with the generation that was maybe just about 5-6 years before that, they're growing up with this just constant gender ideology and things from social media. So I think that was part of it too.
Well, we've had TSS Smith. Yeah, remember we've had TSS Smith on and Dr. Mather on, and they've all basically talked about that so much of the genesis of at least the sexual orientation stuff and the pronouns and that kind of thing, came especially, I mean, it just really boomed during COVID, when all they had time to do was just sit there and do this all day.
Sure. And I mean, you hear, gosh, I can't think of, is it Yuri Bezmenov or something like that? Some Russian dude said, if we're going to take out the United States, we got to do it like from within and through these types of things. And so, some of it could be like these things you hear about, the bot farms and this and that, and, putting this kind of thing into our culture because they know we're going to consume it and get crazy with it. Right. So the consumption of that type of media, I felt like super boomed from like 2010 to like 2015, 2016, ramping up into Trump's first election. And that's really when I started to saw a huge change then from top down from the university was, mid 2015 during that election cycle. Because then it became a whole fear, like what happens if this racist, misogynistic, rapist president gets into the office, right? Well, what's going to happen with my students that go across campus and they're afraid for their life? That we had meetings like that in late 2015. And so I feel like that was kind of the precipice for a lot of the change that we see.
Well, I was just telling you earlier before we got on. So I've had 2 boys who have been at UCO, and I have a friend who teaches at UCO. And I was gonna say where, and then I'm like, no, I don't think I will. At UCO.
Yeah.
And she was sending me pictures. I guess this was 2 years ago, maybe, that she sent me the picture of, and they had taken one of the buildings and made it just for LGBTQ art.
Yeah.
So one building just had nothing but LGBTQ art in it on the UCO campus.
Yeah.
And I mean, you just think these things don't exist in space. They're funded by you and I. I mean, yes, there's tuition that they pay, but we pay for state universities out of our tax dollars, a certain amount of it. So I don't know why we don't have a say.
Yeah, but I think kind of from that bottom up perspective, Jenny, if you have more and more of these students coming in, just making these massive demands and going, I mean, how worked up the left get, over any kind of I mean, they're so much louder than anybody else.
No, they have mostly peaceful protests.
Yeah, they do. They're pretty peaceful with fire bombs and everything else.
Well, the people who bark the loudest are usually the ones who are,
they're the biggest bullies.
Well, hey, listen to this. This ties in a little bit to education. So I had a professor, a colleague. He was older. He was in his 50s at the time, maybe late 40s, and not that that's old. Okay, I'm not saying that it's old, but
whatever.
Older than what I was whenever I was teaching at the time. Anyways, so he was like a huge stickler on cheating at the university, papers, things like that. Was ahead of this like cheating council and this and that. He was always trying to nail kids. Like we were always having these meetings, and he was one that I was always meeting with all the time because we were all different department heads. And he's such a stickler of a guy. Well, after I left, he actually had been doing some inappropriate things with several of the other women professors there, and got big lawsuit, got kicked out of the university. So in my mind, again, the people that bark the loudest and do these things, they're the guilty ones. And he was on the left side. I remember him in that election cycle with Trump just blasting everything on Facebook all the time, like talking crap on Melania and Trump's family. And so I mean, it is a little bit of a mind disease, and I feel like a lot of that started happening, around that time.
Well, but you go back to, and I think people who don't understand the genesis of public education, I think it doesn't make a lot of sense to them. But if you know the genesis of public education and where it started, and at Columbia, and our favorite guy that I can't think of his name. I can see his face. I can't think of his name. Who started basically all the teachers' colleges and started him through Columbia. I mean, this was all, he was a socialist, and he actually had Marxist ideals as a socialist, and he started all of this. So he basically trained up people in the teachers in this system. And if that's the case, and he's a socialist with Marxist ideals, how are you going to get a group of people involved in education that aren't socialists with Marxist ideals?
Yeah.
I mean, Horace Mann. Thank
Yeah.
you. Well, actually, and it wasn't even Horace. Horace Mann came up with the idea for public schools. It's the other one that I can't think of what his name is, but I wanted to go back because John was also a teacher. How much help did these students get from NGOs such as the rights groups? And did you think, I mean, during that time on your college campus, did you feel like or see actual NGOs getting involved?
I was so back then, I don't know if I was too aware to think about that.
Interesting.
I really, I
was
just
probably out of your purview. It's probably just never.
Yeah, to be honest, like I was just trying to do my job. I was trying to be a good teacher. I was trying to lead my graduate assistants. And it was just a weird thing. I was like, what is this thing all of a sudden with these kids? And then we're having a meeting with the provost right before the election to what are we going to do if this happens, with all the professors in my department, and some of the more liberal ones were, we got to have support groups for these kids, and all kinds of stuff. So was something coming in that was maybe influencing them? I'm not too sure. I just wasn't as aware back then to realize, because it was just such a new thing.
Well, see, I think the problem is literally, and it's not past tense. I mean, it was in your case, but I think it's not past tense. It is. What the problem is that the teaching colleges haven't gotten any better. I mean, if you start out as a socialist program with Marxist ideals, I mean, are you suddenly just going to become the most conservative? I mean, it's not going to happen. The tendency is going to go either straight linearly or down, meaning even more ramped up. And he said later, John said, who runs most of the NGOs, the radical left, and we wonder why they do what they do. And we had Gabe Woolley. Remember when we had Gabe on, and Gabe talked about all of the different NGOs that were involved in the high schools there in Tulsa, remember, and how lefty they were, and they were trying to get all of this LGBTQ, RSTUV stuff in the classroom. Remember that? So, I think they're, where'd he go? There he is. You left us for a second there, Mark. Uh-oh. Oh, no. Oh, no. What's happening?
I don't know.
Uh-oh.
You may have to get out and come back in.
Yeah. Maybe. And then Stephanie said, well, we're waiting on Mark because Doge is a joke. That's true. Dr. Pelham says, I was always shocked having these conversations concerning middle school students. PD is now largely focused on how to navigate these situations rather than effective instruction, even in elementary levels. We need to put that back on for, and Amber's on. Good morning from Montana, where it's beautiful and not windy with severe weather. So thanks so much for tuning in, Amber. And it's not Horace Mann, Lisa, help me. It's the other one. It's, good night. Started the teacher colleges at Columbia, was very, very influential in, oh my gosh. Hang on. Okay. Oh no, Amber's in Oklahoma at the moment. Yes, I had a student call the dean to get granted a mental health day to be excused from one of my assignments. So let that sink in for a second. So Dr. Pelham had a student call the dean to get a mental health day to be excused from, and the crazy thing is that they would let them. I mean, how? But it's the same thing. Remember, I told you one time that story about getting called in on the carpet in my principal's office because I put a smiley face. Do you remember that story?
Yeah.
over the smiley face, and the parent thought I was smirking at the student by putting a smiley face on, because I had said something like, well, this test wasn't as good as your last score, so let's bring him up. And so then I was making fun of her or something, and I'm like, that's nuts. Well,
sorry, my
did your Wi-Fi go bye-bye?
No, my doctor called me. I had a patient that I needed to talk to. Yeah, it's okay.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
it was
missed a little bit.
Dewey. Thank you, Lisa. It was Dewey. John Dewey is the one that I'm talking about, that started all the teachers' colleges, who was a socialist with Marxist ideals, who started all the teachers' colleges. So I don't know, Mark. I think what happened was, when you start out with that, that's the way it goes. And because nothing has changed, we are continuing to raise these teachers to do that. And maybe what happened was, until the Trump, that Trump era, his first presidency, I kind of feel like they maybe made a little bit of inroads, but it wasn't like this. But Trump getting in gave them the excuse to just go hog wild.
Oh yeah, of course,
like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to think it was already there.
Yeah.
It's just they finally felt like they had an excuse to be able to use all of the garbage they'd been learning previously.
Well, yeah, they definitely became more radicalized after 2016, like you said, because I think they felt like, hey, now we can, because we have this terrible person in the White House. Let's go whole hog, if you will. But yeah, I definitely think this is something that has been infiltrated or in the works a long time, in terms of just from a higher education standpoint of, because look at all the funding that these universities get. Look at all the grants and all the money that's on the line. I'm big into science, exercise science, physiology, things like that. And I know there's a lot of studies and things that get fudged the evidence or outcomes because you can. Who's over there auditing your study the whole step of the way, and you can change a few numbers to make it significant or whatever, right? So there's a lot of stuff on the line, and for them to just boom wipe it out or whatever, it's gonna put up a fight because they don't want to lose that. So I think it really just boils down to there being a collective awakening, like there kind of has been the last, especially several years, of parents, and thank God for people like Charlie Kirk out there on these college campuses, bringing conservative ideas and thoughts to these places. And look at those huge crowds and things that he gets, so
well, and even more than that, Mark, making the liberals explain their perspective.
Yeah, for sure, because they can't. They fall back on every single thing, and then it becomes a personal attack. Well, I hate you or whatever. Then they just exit the conversation, right? There's nothing they can say that truly usually holds up, to be honest, because it defies common sense in most cases. So yeah, I agree.
Well, John says again, yes, for the kids would say, Mommy said I can be whatever I want. Quit trying to explain to a child that there are only two kinds of kids, boys and girls, without any mixes. And then Dr. Pelham says, exactly. And Lisa says, like I said, there's nowhere to go but up, but they keep going down. So,
well, I think it was definitely a plan from whoever up above, not above the college. I'm not talking college level. I'm talking intelligence, whoever it may be, to indoctrinate these kids through the internet. They found this tool called the internet to indoctrinate these kids all through junior high and high school. And then by the time they get to college, they're getting pretty radicalized.
Sure. Because look at when I was in middle school, high school, the internet was just like me, not really much in terms of interaction. And I think, again, it was that you start getting into 2010s and up beyond. That's when just Facebook exploded, Instagram came out, and that was the tool to which they can influence people, like you're saying, Michael. It's 100,000%. And when these kids are not by their parents and they're on their phone all night and they're in these echo chambers, I mean, what do you think's going to happen? I mean, yeah, of course they're going to get indoctrinated into this idealism because they think that's the coolest, newest thing, and I got to be in on it. So, I think the best thing that parents can do, young parents like myself, my kids are all under 4 years old, is to keep the reins on that and make sure that that doesn't happen because they're
Well,
influenced.
I'm gonna follow up with that because we had a bill in Oklahoma. It's going to pass and the governor's going to sign it because all the other states are doing it. And we simply can't be our own state because that would hurt somebody's feelings or something. So we're going to pass the same crap that's gone around all over the country, thanks to a couple of not NGOs, who are pushing this nonsense, not to have cell phones in classrooms. So every school has to produce some kind of policy that prevents kids from having cell phones. Well, what's going on in classrooms right now? I mean, all the indoctrination that kids are taking photos of teachers being inappropriate with them. But suddenly all of that's going to go away. What's going to happen if there is something bad that happens in a school? Well, now you can't call. I mean, it's absolutely unbelievable. And we don't need the school to do that. What we need is the parent to say, I mean, just do what I did, which was, guys, you may not have the phone after 9 o'clock. After 9 p.m., the phone's gone. You are not allowed to have a computer, or they were not allowed to have computers or televisions in their room until they were 18 years old. They had to have the computer out front where everybody was watching it. They couldn't have their phone in the room after 9 o'clock. Dave and I kept them in a drawer next to the bed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the way to do it. That's not saying don't let them have it during the day or whatever, but it's at night a lot of the times when they're just on there talking back and forth. And so at least wipe that out and have some control over it. Take them away. Give them a break.
Definitely needs to be boundaries and expectations. And then we know about the neurochemistry aspect of it, of how damaging those things are. I mean, heck, prime example. We usually don't let the kids have any type of TV, screen time, or whatever before sleep because it messes them up. And the other night, I let Sienna my daughter draw on her little tablet. She has a coloring app on there, and she was coloring and drawing for like an hour, and she couldn't go to sleep till like 10 o'clock, which is like way past her bedtime. So, just from a developmental standpoint, like, hey, put it away, like because of the mind, and we need sleep and all the things, right? So, but the indoctrination aspect of it, of course, we need to be off, and they need to be off. There needs to be boundaries.
Yeah, and I want to make comment back on that cell phone deal in the classroom, Jenny. And I've said it on this podcast before, but for anyone that hasn't heard it, my daughter, when she was a junior in her English class, when they were doing the serious, bad book deals, that was the only class when they would go into those book discussions and read the books out loud in classroom. That was the only class in English class where the teacher would take away everybody's phones and put them in a box up at the front of the room so that the teacher would not be recorded as to what was going on in that classroom that day.
That's ridiculous.
Well, and Becky says, that's such a good point, Jenny. Without the recorded calls, there'd be no accountability for what was allowed at Uvalde. And then Amber says banning cell phones have other consequences for students that need them to control hearing aids. Well, they put those in, Amber. They went in, during a committee meeting and added all those things. So now you can't argue about that. Isn't that great?
Last thing before I get off, because my mom is at the park with the kids and I don't want her to go crazy. She's got all three of them. I brought this up to Michael's. Hey, don't let me forget to talk about this because it just blew my mind. Like, I didn't know this was happening because I just had with little kids and things, that's all kind of new to me, like the past 4 or 5 years. So I was at the voting booths this past November, and there were so many people from school board or pushing these, school board people. And it was all the left. I mean, these flyers that were super vague. Vote for this person. This is what they stand for. And it was just the craziest thing. I felt like it was I was at like a job fair, like a sales fair or something, you know. It was because that didn't I didn't remember that happening the last two elections. And so that was a weird thing. I mean, they're trying real hard to keep that in the school system in terms of, you know, ideology.
Yeah.
And they pray. They were preying on the people who didn't know. I mean, they would literally go up to people that looked so unassuming, that had no idea, and would just be, oh, you got to vote for this person, this person. But I see you brought that up. So my sister-in-law, my wife's little sister, just finished junior college at this place right here, Montgomery. It's a Lone Star College. It's like a local community college here, all about Houston. And when we look at this, I mean, look, it says, we beat them before, we'll beat them again. And it's a Trump supporter, red hat, MAGA hat, obviously. And then behind is like an SS soldier from the German army, because that's the helmets that the Germans wore in World War II. So what are they trying to insinuate there? That every Trump supporter is a Nazi, obviously. And this is at higher education, right? It's just ridiculous. I don't know how they're allowed to keep that up there.
Because I think most people don't make a stink, you know, and I think, you know, think about it. Even in K-12, where parents ostensibly have the ability, they don't take it, but they do have the ability, you know, to make schools go in certain directions. They won't do it at that, you know, in K-12. And so think about what happens when your kid is 18 and they go to college. It's like, done with that. They don't care what goes on.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Definitely.
It's sad. Things would be different if people would be involved, but
it's sad. But, you know, I really do think that the tide is turning a lot. You know, I really point to, because before I brought him up earlier, but I think Charlie Kirk is making a huge difference with Turning Point Action, his little company, and what he does on these college campuses. And he's got to keep that going. And there's been a huge shift. I mean, you look at some of the poll numbers about kids that are now 18 to 29 switching to more conservative idea, because I think everybody's starting to see through it. So that's a good sign.
Yeah. Well, we hope so.
Yeah, I hope so. I'm always optimistic. Yeah. But thanks for having me on, man. I mean, I appreciate you guys and what you're doing. Michael, I love you. You've always been such a mentor to me. And you guys keep it up, keep it going. And I got to get the kids before my mom goes crazy.
Well, thanks for being on, Mark. We sure do appreciate you. Hang in there.
Okay. All right. You guys have a good rest of the day.
All right.
You too. Bye.
All right. Bye. Bye.
Let's go through a couple of so Amber said it's the fallout that will be caused by the cell phone policy. Students will stick out and are now set up to be targeted and pulled because of jealousy by other students. And she says, correction, those IEP students will stick out and now are set up to be targeted and bullied because I lost it. So you mean, Amber, you mean the kids that get to keep their cell phones because they have issues like they're diabetic or whatever, they'll stick out to get bullied, I think is what you're saying. John says it all depends on who posts it, who will get by with it. Yeah, well, I tend to agree with that because, again, it's a big, giant echo chamber. And if you put something out there that's in the liberal, you know, hate Trump, he's a bully, Nazi, whatever, then you get it left up for sure, and you're not fired. And Steph says that's the point with Amber. It's correct. Becky says, you got to be kidding me. Those are the things that are instigated. The funding being cut. Those are the things that are instigating the funding being cut from universities, but then those funds aren't pulled from the programs doing that. But that's so true. It's crazy. We all know that people's brains aren't fully baked until age 25. Well, isn't it, Michael, isn't it later for men, like 60, 65?
Yeah, I'm still learning.
Yeah, well, us mature adults had no interaction with our parents the whole school day on the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and we turned out great, right? So what has changed with the schools that kids have to record goings on in the classroom? You know what, Denise? That is a really excellent point.
Yeah.
Because I'm trying to think. So I graduated in 81. And I think I've told you about the time when my history teacher went kind of nuts and she ended up leaving and she did wacko things in the classroom. But that was so in all of my years in school, that's the only thing I really ever remember that was weird happening. And that was busing years. So, I mean, if that's the only thing that I can remember that was weird happening, then that's kind of saying something. Oh, so we didn't just tell Mark that Steph said it was nice to meet her. Oh, Marvin said, good morning, Jenny. I'll admonish you again, Marvin. Quit writing so much. I can't get it all read or out there.
Yeah, that's right.
He's doing such a great job. The liberal teachers is what changed the classroom. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Pedos and groomers are there now, sadly. I mean, V1SUT tells us that all the time. When teachers and students are allowed to do insane things in a class of 30 students, someone needs to record it. That's why and I think, Lisa, you said something up here that I missed getting in. But I agreed with that.
But it's tough also, Jenny, I hated
constant and all the other states are doing it ideas because that's just what we're doing right now. It's just nuts.
Yeah. Well, I hated that my daughter would come home or one of my boys would come home, tell me something. I'm like, well, the second that it happens, call me, text me, record it, whatever. But that, she didn't want to put herself in that situation to be, the one. And I felt bad too. I'm like, well, I was like, she just wanted to do her own deal, make her grades, not be so controversial. And I hate putting kids in the middle of that. I mean, you're going to have some kids with some real kind of.
Well, Amber makes another point that's really good. In Oregon, in some school districts, we had homeroom moms in our elementary school classrooms, volunteers, and we need to go back to that. They kicked the volunteers and parents out of the classroom. How many times have you said that, Michael?
Yeah. Can't even go to lunch. Can't even go to lunch with your kids.
Well, and that's a big one too. We did take God out of public schools in the 70s, and you can actually see but again, I'm a big one on separation of church and state. So, I mean, so long I'm kind of in a quandary about that. Why are teachers doing insane things? Because they're taught to do insane things. Amber, their eyes were on danger. Their eyes were dangerous to the new agenda. And that is what I think, because I think I've told the story how I got involved in this, like in Common Core. And that was, so my kids went to school in 2007. I guess they started in school. And I remember, I got really super involved. I was with the PTA. I did, I was at the school, a lot. And I just started realizing that their whole agenda was completely opposite of mine. And I wasn't even a homeschool person. I thought people who homeschool were crazy then. I was like, oh my gosh, we have one of those in our neighborhood. That's so weird. Literally. So think about that. Then if I was noticing as a former teacher, but not as a, kind of eyes open to what's going on person, and I noticed that their agenda was off, it was like, let's raise all this money so we can have a computer classroom, get everybody on that. Oh yeah, we need to have it. Why do kindergartners need to be on the computer?
Yeah, no reason whatsoever.
And I would ask, and do you know what they would tell me? Because Putnam City has them.
Yeah. Well, I told you about that conversation I had with a guy when I ran for school board who was calling me out on social media, all this stuff. I invited him to a meeting or a phone call. He chose a phone call, so we had a phone call. And he had real young kids in the district, like kindergarten, first grade, second grade. And we were talking about all the Chromebooks and all the, he didn't understand what was happening at like the high school level with all the books and all that stuff. But to the point at that time, Jenny, was we were talking about the computer interaction. He's like, hey, I want my kids to be learning how to code, when they're in the first grade. And I just told him, I said, that's nice. I said, if you want to do that, go ahead. I said, but that's not the proper way to teach a child, especially, in primary school like that. And I said, hey, let me just give you a little piece of advice from my field where we look at major investment in technology. I said, no one's going to be coding in 10 years or 15 years. When your kid's graduating senior, it's all going to be done by AI and computers in the first place. There's no one that's going to be coding as a person outside of maybe someone telling a computer how to code, but your kid's not going to be sitting there writing code the way that you think they are 15 years from now.
Well, I hope so, since I have one that does that for a living. Administration does not like you going to the school to tell them the wrongs of a teacher and their action. And we've talked about that before. That's absolutely so true. You guys. Lisa said we were told in California that kids needed computers to compete with China. They weren't even hiding it. Line upon line, precept upon precept. Oh my goodness, that's so absolutely true. Okay, so before we get down that road, do you want to switch over? Let's switch gears and you talk about
personal property, as it's going to affect you the way that you don't realize it.
Oh, that's true too. Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I tried to condense this down, and I tried to really, I don't want to say dumb it down, because I made one presentation and it was like way going into the weeds, and I'm like, no one's even going to understand all these terms and everything I'm even talking about in the first place. So I had to redo it all, and I hope, and even though there's a lot of slides, we're just going to summarize a whole bunch of this stuff, because I just want to get the basic concept of what is going to happen. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen, because it is going to happen. This is all by design, just like everything else in the financial world. This has all been planned and by design, and it's all pretty recent. So what we are going to talk about is a book that was written by David Webb, and it's called The Great Taking. And he was a former major finance guy, like big time Wall Street, big time guy. And he saw, and he saw just recently, over the last, 5, 6, 7 years, 10 years, maybe, he saw this major shift in what you consider assets when it comes to finance. So like when I ask you, Jenny, like personal property, what do you instantly think of like as your personal property?
Well, I just always go to my house.
Yeah.
I mean,
your house, maybe your cars, just your possessions that you have. That's what your land, your cash, things like that. And that's what most people think of personal property. You don't really think of your financial assets, like your stocks, and I'm just saying in general, most people, like if they had Apple shares, they don't really think of that as their personal property. It's just part of their.
That's true.
I mean, like when I say that, yes, it is your personal property. It should be, but it's not the first thing that comes to your mind. Like if I say personal property, the first thing that comes to your mind is not your stock portfolio, your retirement accounts, your financial assets. That's the last thing that would come to your mind and that's just kind of how things are. So what I'm going to talk about today is the financial side of your personal property. So, and that's all your securities. So as we go into this, and remember, I tried to make this, I'm going to try to make this as easy
you've
as
dumbed it down. I know you've told us
as easy as I can. So in any way, basically all these things are securities, and securities have been around for 400 plus years. Okay. So in the past, your financial assets, your security has been, that's your personal property. And that's just any financial asset, your ownership or debt. It's a securities fungible, which means it's interchangeable. It's tradable. It can be bought and sold in the financial markets. Just some types. There's equities, which is like your stocks. There's debt, which is like your bonds. And then there's derivatives, which are like options and futures and other financial products. That's just kind of making it as easy as we can. So some like other examples. So like you've got mutual funds, which that's like what a lot of people's retirement accounts, they're in mutual funds or ETFs or exchange traded funds from their manager at Morgan Stanley or Edward Jones or, whoever their broker is. So there's a couple of those. So what we're going to talk about is what has happened at the state level with the Uniform Commercial Code. And it is all outlined in Article 8, which if you go try to read Article 8, I mean, it's all legalese, just like always. So
okay, but let me ask you, is Article 8 a national thing or a state thing?
This is the Federal Uniform Commercial Code.
Okay, federal.
Article 8. So they've written these laws, but they've been adopted at the state level to do it so quietly that no one knows. Okay, so you have these massive banking lobbies, and the banking lobbies have basically made themselves the secured creditor. So it's just like if any situation where you have to get a loan or put your money in a bank or whatever it may be, you're an unsecured creditor. Always. The lowest person on the totem pole is us. So if something happens, we lose. The secured creditors are the major banks, and not even all the banks qualify. There's only a couple of them, and we'll kind of go through that. But in the too big to fail kind of era, that's where the financial crisis is what really, in my opinion, like 2008 was a test run to put these things into case law, because before 2008, there was no actual case law precedents for what we're getting ready to talk about. But
see, Steph is always ahead of you.
Yeah. So basically, and that's one aspect of it. The cash you put in a bank is not your cash. That's the bank's cash. Okay. So if something happens, and that's kind of in the grand scheme of this thing, we're talking about entities much bigger than like our local bank, like a Bank of Oklahoma or MidFirst or whatever. But if a Bank of Oklahoma goes out, even though that's your money, you're an unsecured creditor to that bank, and you don't get that money back. I mean, yeah, there's FDIC insurance to that they put in place to kind of, pad the waters of people not wanting to put their money in the bank and to kind of help stop bank runs. So there's ways around all that. But yes, ultimately, we'll just say when you put your cash in a bank, it's not your cash anymore. It's the bank's cash. And it's not even the bank's cash. That's used as collateral against all their other loans and debts and derivatives that goes way up the ladder. And that's what we're going to talk about, is everything that you think you own is actually collateral to a financial product that's tied somewhere else. And just to summarize this, and the UCC code allows the secured creditors to get that collateral paid first to them and not to you. So that's what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to show just a little bit of examples through here, but that's the main thing. Everything that you think you own that's on a piece of paper or digits on a screen, it's not yours. It's not yours in any way. You're just a beneficial owner, or there's another term for it, which we'll get to, but you're the very last in line. And I'm going to show some examples of how that works. So, it's already got an example. Okay. So let's say you buy 100 shares of Apple. And let's say, Jenny, let's just use like Edward Jones as your local broker. That's where your retirement account is, or your stock broker. That way, because there's Edward Jones all over the place. So your local Edward Jones broker, you call them up, say, hey, buy me 100 shares of Apple. All they do is they just they just record the transaction. Okay. So there's money in your account. You buy the Apple. Local Edward Jones is just recording the transaction. Now you're just entitled to that security. You don't own it because A, did you get a security certificate in the mail? Did you get a physical piece of paper? Did you receive the shares of Apple? No, you didn't. In the past, you would have. Rewind, 20, 30 years ago before they started doing electronic trading, but it's not even electronic trading. But you go back in the past, if you bought a stock, you received the share of the stock and it was serialized.
That's I remember that.
Yeah, that's another key component of this whole thing. You actually owned it. It was in your custody. It was in your possession. Right. Okay. And if you lost those shares too bad. If your house burned down or something happened. But that's another thing is they got rid of all the paper certificates because that would put it into that would actually be your personal property. If you got a paper certificate, that's your personal property now because you own that. So now the thing is, you just have a contract with your broker that says the broker's going to provide these services for you. They're going to handle the transaction. They're going to handle all your assets. They're going to do all that for you.
Can I raise my hand? So does that mean that if I went to Edward Jones and bought 100 shares of Apple, I could say, dude, I need to have my stock certificate?
No, they won't sell. They won't give it to you.
They won't.
All of that's done away with because of how they've changed the laws of actually who owns, and that's what we're going to get into, who owns the asset itself. So that's why we've got to change these laws to where we are the secured creditor because it's our money. We bought the item, and we're going to talk about that too. But yes, if you bought it, there's nothing you can do about it. It's just a number on the screen, and that's it. That's as far as it goes. Yes, you could trade it, you could sell it, and as far as the market goes, if everything's okay, then it's still okay. But when we run into a crisis, which we're going to, you're going to see just what's going to happen. But that's just a real easy example of Apple shares. You don't get the paper certificates. They're not serialized. It's not your property. They're not sitting in your safe. They're not even sitting at your local Edward Jones anymore. They're sitting way up higher
somewhere.
Yeah, they're way up higher in a clearinghouse that has all of the assets in a single place, all of them. So in Article 8, it provides protection to those creditors, to the actual secured creditors, which is not us, because they pledge our assets as collateral. So like your local broker, Edward Jones or whoever it may be, they pledge your shares as collateral against all their other debt they put out there. And I'm going to show some examples of that. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you're an unsecured creditor, period. That's just how it is. So if your local Edward Jones, or if not your local, if Edward Jones goes out of business or is insolvent or something happens, you should get your shares back, right? They're your Apple shares. Edward Jones doesn't own those shares. You do, correct? So you should get those back. But if something happens to there's 1,000 intermediaries in between you and where your stock actually is. If any of those go out, then the guys at the end, the secured creditors, they get your stock. You don't get them. And I'm going to show some examples that's actually happened in case law. And that was part of the thing on 2008. So I'm actually going to read this because this is from the book, The Great Taking itself. So, and my camera is like right in front of my screen. So if I have trouble reading this, or if I got to move around too much, Jenny, I may have to have you read it. But in the groundbreaking book, The Great Taking, which galvanized many of the questions that inspired the research into the Uniform Commercial Code, David Webb explains, and this is from the author, essentially all securities owned by the public in custodial accounts. So your Edward Jones is your custodian. They're holding your stocks or your bonds or your 401k or your IRAs. They're holding it for you. Pension plans and investment funds are now encumbered as collateral underpinning the derivatives complex, and I'm going to show you some things in the derivatives complex, which I've shown before, which is so large, an order of magnitude greater than the entire global economy, that there is not enough of anything in the world to back it. The illusion of collateral backing is facilitated by a daisy chain of hypothecation and rehypothecation. So that means you've got your 100 shares of Apple, okay? Your local broker has that as collateral against some other debt, which is then put into a basket of things that goes into another basket, which goes into another basket. That's rehypothecation. That's where they take it from over here, they put it over here, then they put it back over here. So they can do that as many times as they want. And that's part of the whole problem with this whole deal. So in which the same underlying client collateral is reused many times over by a series of secured creditors. And so it is these creditors who understand the system who have demanded even more access to the client's collateral. So as we go up, let me see. So just to put a couple numbers on what he said right there, the global GDP is $106 trillion. That's global GDP. The top 5 banks, which I'm going to show you the graph of this, or the chart, the top 5 banks just in the United States. We're not even talking international. We're not even talking Japan. We're not talking Europe. We're not talking the higher entities in the financial system, like the Federal Reserve, all the Federal Reserve banks, the Bank of International Settlements, all those other banks. There's thousands of these other banks. Okay, so if these markets operate normally, there's no issues. If there's some type of 2008 crisis or probably a lot worse, all those assets are going to be swept away, just like they did with gold back in the 30s, where they confiscated all the gold. Then they just issued, they issued you paper certificates for the gold
to get it back.
Yeah. So there.
Well, if you don't think that's just the definition of inflation right there, isn't it? Global GDP, 106 trillion. But the top U.S. banks have 393 trillion in assets.
Because
where did those assets? How did we get such a huge disparity there?
Well, it's completely fake. That's the whole thing. It's that rehypothecation where they take your 100 shares of Apple and then they turn it into 1 million shares, down the road with all these different investment vehicles. But like I said, we can stop this, but I want to show this. I want to show this real quick. I have to remove this one so I can add this one. Okay. So this is our December 31st.
Oh, you've shown this before.
Yeah. So this is December 31st, 2024. These numbers are in millions. So if we look at this total derivative number here, like JP Morgan, let me highlight this if we can see it. That's $47 trillion in derivatives at JP Morgan. Okay. Then you've got Citigroup, Bank of America, Goldman, Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo. These are State Street. As you just go down the list, the numbers just continue. This whole list is what is it? 200 something trillion something. It's even more than it's more than that. But anyway, this is numbers right here from the comptroller of the United States overseeing the banking system. Okay. So these numbers are
hold on.
They're out of your mind.
You have to see the comment Dr. Pelham made. You're going to die.
Yeah, pretty much.
The only reason why I'm laughing at that is because I don't know how many conversations Michael and I have had off air about that exact same thing. So, Becky, I don't know where you were on the spectrum of reading thoughts today, but it was right up there.
Yeah. Well, so here, the first example that I want to give is Lehman Brothers. So, and I want to preface that with our own office here. We had investments in Lehman. Okay. So when Lehman went out in 2008, guess what, Jenny? Did we get our investments back?
No, I'm sure you
No,
didn't.
we didn't. Whose property was that? Was that our personal property that we bought? Those investments were our property. So Lehman was the first literal run of case law where they cemented in here. And what happened in Lehman is, so you had the financial crisis. JP Morgan was the primary lender, and they were also the custodian for Lehman Brothers. So anything we had at Lehman actually was wind up being owned by JP Morgan at the end of this deal, because JP Morgan they were the secure creditor in this whole deal. So they had control right here. JP Morgan had control of Lehman's assets as a lender and had security interest in all of Lehman's assets as a result of the changes of the Uniform Commercial Code Article 8, as well as the 2006 change in the federal bankruptcy law. JP Morgan was able to take all of Lehman's accounts as collateral for the loans that Lehman could no longer pay. Those are those derivatives that we're talking, part of those derivatives that we're talking about there. So back to the author Webb, he concludes that the bankruptcy of Lehman Brothers was used to establish case law precedent that the protected class of secured creditors, which is only a handful of these people, have absolute priority claim to the client's assets, and that potentially and practically they will end up with all the assets. And that is true, unless we change the law, which we can.
Okay, so here's an interesting thing. If you don't follow Oklahoma Farms and Ranches, you should. One of the things that Sandra's been bringing up over and over again are the number of bills in our Oklahoma legislature that are meant to take away responsibility of all kinds of things, from government to private companies, for all kinds of things, for poisoning our water, for poisoning our ground, for poisoning us with vaccines, for poisoning. I mean, literally, they have figured out now, because most of you, we've got a very few people on today. I mean, not our normal, regular, 100 plus audience for live on a Friday morning. And very few of you guys on today. And it's because these people, like the financial elitists, they understand that nobody cares. So long as you get your Thunder tickets, you don't give a crap what's going on. And they'll do all of this stuff underneath the radar because they know you're not paying attention, because well, what do you need to worry about? You just don't need to care. So if we were paying, thank you, Gloria. I meant to say this earlier. We should have at least a little bit of reverence today because it is Good Friday. I woke up remembering that and then forgot about it because my head was exploding, like Stephanie said. And so I totally forgot. So Gloria, thank you for reminding me of that. I'll have to be more aware of asking forgiveness for but it is true. We have just, and that's true. People have put trust in the untrustable. That is part of the problem. And I think I would actually even go so far as to say that is the problem. It's what you said earlier, Michael, too big to fail, right? So everybody's like, well, we elect these people to go do what they say that they're going to do on the cards that we get in the mail we're inundated with, and what they say on television, they're going to do what they say. Yeah. So we'll go night and get our Thunder tickets. Well, and that's how we've gotten into this. This is why we are where we are. Sorry.
Let me give you another. This is not part of what we're talking about, but this is the easiest example to understand about how all this is going to work. Let's say you buy a brand new car, Jenny. You go down, you pay cash, right? You don't want any debt.
I don't do that. Well,
yeah. Well, let's just say you are.
Cars,
you're going to buy brand new. What are you going to buy? Bentley?
Range Rover.
Range Rover. Okay. You're going to be the moms of Range Rover. So you're going to go buy your brand new Range Rover. You're going to pay cash. So you have no debt. You own it outright. Yeah. All's good in the world. Well, what you don't know is that while that Range Rover was sitting in the inventory of the dealer that you bought it from, it was pledged as collateral against their loans. Okay. So because it was part of that collateral basket, if something happens to one of these intermediaries, clearing places for the loan up the line, okay, then a company like JP, let's say one of these intermediaries crashes or whatever, is insolvent, goes out of business. JP Morgan's going to show up at your house with a tow truck and tow your Range Rover away because it was pledged as collateral on this basket of loans. Now, it's not going to happen with cars. It's going to happen with all the other stuff.
Yeah.
But that's just an example of how this whole deal is going to happen. That's exactly how it's going to happen. You think you own it, but you don't, because the asset itself legally is in a basket that's protected going up through Uniform Commercial Code to these secured creditors. That's what's going to happen.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, and these were all the footnotes, the references to all that stuff that I was showing right there. So the legal owner is the entity. This according to law, and I'm going to show some of the laws. The legal owner is the entity that controls the security with a secured interest. So you don't have a secured interest, do you? When you own Apple, you don't have a secured interest. You're not, you're unsecured. So there's only one or two places that have the secured interest over whatever that is. So as we go in here, this is the Article 8 of the Uniform Commercial Code. So we're not going to read all this stuff, but I just want to point out. So when you first go in, it seems like it's on your side because it's saying right here that, except otherwise provided, a person acquires a security entitlement if,
Entitlement, though.
Yeah. So when you buy something, it doesn't matter what it is. If it's a financial product that's classified as security, which is literally everything that you're going to buy from a broker or have one of your managers do, if you're on E-Trade, or doesn't matter, it's a security. So you get the entitlement. Okay. So that's number one. So as we go in here a little bit, security entitlement means that the rights and property of the interest, property interest of the entitlement holder with respect to the financial asset. Okay, now they say you have the security entitlement, but it's in respect to the financial asset. So they add another definition, another little stipulation in there. Okay, so now the financial asset is tied to that. So now we go in here. The entitlement holder means a person who is identified in the records of the security, in the records of a security intermediary, which that is the intermediaries. That's your higher level clearing houses. Okay. That's like
Morgan Stanley.
Yeah. That's so as the person having security entitlement against the security intermediaries. Okay. So that's a whole bunch of legalese, but that's basically saying you have the entitlement against your intermediary. Okay. That's all it's saying. So then we go in here, a claim of a creditor of a security intermediary who has the security interest of the financial asset. So there's that financial asset word tied back in here again. Held by a security intermediary has priority over the claims of the security intermediary's entitlement holders. So there's the first line right there where you get to where now you don't have the claim to your assets. That's just the first one. There's a whole bunch of them. That's the very first one. Okay. And then we get in here some more. The claim of the creditor has priority over the claim of the entitlement holders. Remember, you're just the entitlement holder. That's it. You're just the guy with the piece of paper that says, here's my assets. Here's my 401k. I get this statement in the mail. I can log on and look at how good all my stuff is. Okay. So you're not the creditor. You're not the creditor. So the SEC adopted like a beneficial ownership rules. That's you. Okay, so you're the beneficial owner if everything's okay. Then you get to have your stuff, but only if it's okay. So then this just goes into the rules regarding the beneficial ownership, and that's just kind of recently. So that's just more. We'll just kind of skip that. That just talks more about the beneficial owner. So then In October of 2023, the SEC amends the beneficial ownership reporting rules. So that just the way that they have to tell you what's going on, things like that. All right, then they accelerate their deadlines for beneficial ownership by 5%. So that's just another reporting rule. It doesn't. I didn't even need to put that in here. Okay, this talks about the secured party side, which that's starting to now go up the ladder, and I didn't need to put that one in there. Okay, so here again. This was in another deal where it basically says that the intermediary, which is your higher level people, have priority over claims of securities over the entitlement holders who have the entitlements with respect to their financial assets. So that's just another part of this code that protects them and not us. And what I want to show here is this, and I accidentally cut the top of this off. This was a letter from the New York Federal Reserve. So this guy, Thomas Martin, he was from Belgium. He was an international owner of United States assets. He lost his assets. This was in 2006. Okay, so some intermediary went out. He lost his assets. So he was petitioning the Federal Reserve to give him his assets because he didn't have anything to do. He believed he owned his assets. This is literally the Federal Reserve answering him saying, you know what, this goes to a clearing place in a global clearing place in the world, and there's already been litigation to it. There's nothing you can do about it. So I just put this in there because here's an international guy buying an American asset that goes to a clearing place that's literally global. And it is. These things, there's only one or two places in the world that hold all of these things. So here's just another example here. If a secured creditor has control over the financial asset, which that's what we talked about earlier, whoever has control of that asset actually owns it. Over the financial asset, it will always have priority over entitlement holders.
Oh my God.
Who have security entitlements with respect to the financial asset. If the security intermediary is a clearing corporation, which we're going to talk about them, the claims of the creditors have priorities over the claims of the entitlement holders. So even the middleman in there have priority over you. Okay. So, and then this is just another one where they're literally talking about even if there's fraud, let's say in between the process here that you had a fraudulent player at your Edward Jones, doing complete fraud. Even if there's fraud, they're still not yours. They still go up to these higher level secured intermediaries. So even they have it all covered. They literally have it all covered. So, and this goes into the bankruptcy with safe harbor. And safe harbor sounds like it should be helping us, but it doesn't. It's literally the other way around. It's the safe harbor for the banks. So this is talking about literally in bankruptcy, it's still not yours. Even if one of these financial people go into bankruptcy, it's still not yours. Let's see, the code will have to guard against attempts to grab massive amounts of collateral on the eve of bankruptcy. So that's still the same thing. If it's already been collateralized, it's not yours. So this word, I just showed this because the safe harbor allows banks to take their clients' assets back. So there was a bankruptcy or something that happened, and I'll show an example here. So this was an actual case where the trustee of whatever one of these accounts were, they gave the assets back, and they literally had to claw the asset. They had to take the assets back from the person, whoever owned them. This was literally a lawsuit right here. All right, so Jenny was out. So here's where everything goes. Everything goes to this one place, which is called the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. So everything that's bought, every financial asset, everything, every security, everything goes into this one place. This is the holder of everything. So you get, so that's where I was talking about paper certificate. So you don't get your paper certificates anymore. Everything goes to this place here. And I want to bring up this other page. Let me bring this down. Let me see what I have on the next screen. Just a second.
So who invented the DTTC?
Well, the initial deal was it was kind of started back in 1973, but it really got going in 1999. And I want to show, even though I don't like Wikipedia, I want to show.
Is this private or governmental or
No.
both?
Yeah, this is pretty much private. So I just want to bring something down so I can show you real quick. So here's the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. It was a different company back in 1973, but this current iteration was done in 1999. But what I want to show you is through its subsidiaries, they basically handle all information services of equities, corporate municipal bonds, investment trusts, government mortgage-backed securities, money market instruments, over-the-counter derivatives. I mean, all transactions between mutual funds, insurance carriers, and respective investors. They literally handle everything. And if we go down here, I'll just scroll down a little bit. So they have all these other pieces of their own puzzle, which is the DTC, the NSCC, the FICC, Global Trade Repository, the Euro CCP, the DTTC solutions. I mean, it just goes on and on. It's literally insane. So let me get back to our main deal. And we don't have too much more because I don't want to break everybody's brain. But
mine's already busted.
But everything, literally everything, you got pension somewhere, it's not yours. It's owned by this entity right here. They're the ultimate owner. If you have retirement accounts, 401k accounts, anything that stocks, bonds, your portfolios, any loan, any mortgage, any debt, it all goes to this one place right here. So if there's a failure within that DTCC series of lines in any possible way, then they've already said, so this is a statement from the DTCC itself. They literally said that they are not going to fund any failure of anything. They're just going to start a new clearing, corporate clearing partnership with just brand new, with some, just create a new one out of thin air. That's literally what they're saying here. They're not going to fund anything that fails. They're just going to let it fail so they can own all the assets, and then they're just going to start a new one. That's literally their law.
Okay. Well, so doesn't that go back to exactly what?
Yeah. The whole system is going to crash on purpose because that's the only way that you can have a grab. But like I said, I'll just leave this. This is the last slide I put in there. But we can change this at our local level. This is, all those things have only been adopted in our state. Our state law allows all those things to happen. So we can reverse all that. If you want to, and to me, it's so critical that we get some legislator up to speed so they can bring some legislation to protect, because it doesn't matter if you're right or left or whatever. I mean, you're talking about wipeout of all assets. If it's not in your custody, if it's not at your house, in your safe, or in your possession, it's going to be gone. And that's, that ties into the whole, new financial system, the CBDC, because the dollar is just being wasted, and it's being wasted on purpose. And, I don't want to go down that rabbit trail, but I'm just telling you, this guy, David Webb, has done massive amount of research. And right after he did it, so it was last year, I think, two states immediately jumped on top of getting the legislation change, which is North Dakota or South Dakota and Tennessee. Both of them got blocked in the last legislative session because of the banking lobby going in there and just absolutely scaring the ever living everything out of all those legislators on purpose. But the banking lobby completely lies. They literally go into the legislator's office. They show them, hey, you're the owner of the asset. See, it says right here in Article 8, the very first definition, you're the beneficial owner. So these guys don't understand that just a little bit later down the code, all of that is completely reversed to where now these organizations are the ones that have all of the control of all the assets. But at the end of the day, Jenny, think about it. When you look at like these major banks, they only have one product and it's debt. Okay. And debt is control, because to have debt, you literally have to have collateral. No bank is going to issue debt without collateral. And at the end of the day, what do they want to do? They want to own it all. They want to own everything, just like the king owned everything. And I'm not talking about your local bank here in Oklahoma, your local branch, or even our local banks. It goes so much higher than that, because just like everything, even if you bought whatever your assets are, they're not actually at your bank. They're way up the chain in these clearing corporations. So
that's not the same for a house, a paid for house without a mortgage, correct?
It depends on how many times your mortgage has been rehypothecated into a series of loans.
No. If you own the property outright.
Yeah, I don't know it. Okay, I can't say for sure because we haven't had a legal case yet to where the bank has come back. Where one of these intermediaries have failed and they've tried to claw back actual real estate assets. Okay, so right now we're talking about securities, and I think that's more or less. Unless somewhere along the line you've pledged your house as collateral into another financial product.
Yeah, okay. I would think if you don't have a second mortgage, if you haven't used your house as collateral, I wouldn't see how they could get to it.
Yeah.
Because once it's paid for, the bank has it's paid for. You get a certificate in the mail, saying.
Yeah. Yeah, you should actually have the title to your house.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it's maybe unencumbered from one of these financial products and I'm probably saying if you used it in as collateral in that system.
Yeah.
Where you put your house up.
Right.
For, whatever, in a loan for, whatever.
Right. Well, let's cut to this and then let's go back because we've had like 27,000 comments. So but this is the one I think that everybody's asking right now, not just Lisa.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, I can't give you financial advice. I can tell you what I do, but I got out of the market 6-7 years ago completely. And that's my job. My job is literally in the market in our office. But me personally and my family, I got out of the market, out of my retirement accounts. I do own a lot of gold. I own a lot of silver. I have a lot of crypto. I have real estate. You want physical things. If you're a farmer, you want to have farming equipment. Just actual things that are going to be tangible in one way or another. And if you're just depending on your 401k or something, if there's a hiccup, which I believe there's going to be, because you can't sustain these debt levels that we're at. Because remember what I said, 1 million in seconds is 11 days. 1 billion is 32 years. 1 trillion is 32,000+ years. That's just 1 trillion. There's 300 trillion in the top 5 banks in derivatives, And to have those derivatives, you have to have collateral. I mean,
so
think about,
gold and silver
yeah,
and cash
gold, silver,
and
cash. You can have
property
cash,
that
tangible
you can.
assets. Tangible assets. I like crypto too, certain cryptos, but that's, you know, that's pretty tough for a lot of people to go down that road. But
So this is a concern. So Tosley says, I asked for my deed after I paid off the mortgage and they said no, it's kept at the county and they keep it as collateral for taxes.
wow. Yeah. Well, see, there you go. So there may be issue, Jenny, because if they're keeping that as collateral for taxes, that's going to be tied into some type of financial product in one way or another that may be subject to this.
Well, what's the difference between a title and a deed? Because I know I have the title for my mom's house.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the title is just I don't know exactly. Maybe the title is just not maybe it's not the actual document that you, maybe that's just a record, you know, just a single record that doesn't actually show the ultimate ownership. I don't know.
I'm going to go in there and look. I mean, he's giving me something to think about. Let's go back to these questions or these comments. Partnerships of NGOs and government are removing personal property rights. For these NGOs, they want the land to do with what they want, to force you to eat what they want you to eat, which is bugs. Yeah. Steph made a huge comment, and I wanted to throw it up at the time, but I was afraid to derail your thought process. Your data is personal property too, and that's why we fought the state longitudinal database system. That's why I got on that screed yelling at Representative, gosh, I lost his name. Where's the bow tie? Is the chair of the Common Ed Committee. Anyway, why I got so upset at him the other day, because yes, data is personal property. Means what's in the bank isn't yours. It all rolls back to a World Bank, and you just showed, you know, essentially what that was. So Steph asked, how solvent even is the FDIC really?
Let me tell you something. The FDIC got wiped out literally when a couple years ago when the two banks out in California, when what were the banks?
I can't remember, but I know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. When those two banks got wiped out, they literally wiped out all of the FDIC, and literally the Federal Reserve or one of the big institutions had to come in and just give them a little bit more money. But I'm telling you, the FDIC only has a small percentage of the amount of money that's even out there. And I'll get those numbers and I'll put them up on one of the next podcasts. But I'm telling you, the FDIC is a complete joke. And remember, Jenny, we played that one video from that FDIC meeting where the guy said, hey, if everybody knew that we don't have the money. Remember that? Remember that video we played?
I remember that video. Yes.
Yeah.
Somebody took it at one of the meetings.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one of the FDIC meetings, which who's going to go back and watch those videos? I mean, come on. But they're laughing. They're literally laughing about not having the money. And everybody just thinks, you know, as long as it's okay, it's okay.
Yeah. Banks use our money to make themselves money, then charge the U.S. money to keep our money in their system.
Yeah.
Amber says, well, goodness. So take any money out of the bank that's left over each month after the bills are paid. And then Steph says, Amber, I just leave in my account what I'll need. And then I cash out most of my deposits. And then Steph says, save your receipts too, to prove where your cash comes from. Good idea. Gloria, I think, was referring to what you said, but I don't remember what that was. And then we've only shown this 27,000 times because I think this is probably the most important comment out there. So if they've created this bloat for themselves, right, this inflation in what they have in credit versus what they have in the bank, how do you get rid of that? You push a button that goes, oops.
Yeah.
I lost everything. We'll have to start all over.
Yeah.
And said,
well, and like just to dovetail on top of that, like I said with Julianne when she was on and we were talking about cryptocurrency a little bit in one way or another, they create these asset classes and then they move all the bad stuff into the new asset class. That way the old stuff can still stay around. That's how they've done it with derivatives and all these things that have just kind of come out of nowhere, like every 10 or 20, 30
It's
years.
just financial gymnastics.
Yeah, 100%.
Watching heads explode. Yes. They're missing Michael flipping the tables at the temple.
Yeah, there we go.
Get on that. People who put their trust in the untrustable. The mind boggle. Thieves.
Yeah,
yes.
100%.
People aren't even asking questions. Don't give me a paper copy. Okay. It's all digital. Okay. It's safe. Is it safe? Okay. We've become complacent, and I think that's to what he was responding.
Well, what I have to do is first I need to get a legislator.
Hold on, this is funny though. I like what Amber said.
Yeah.
Just, leverage yourself to the hilt like they are.
Yeah, but the only thing is whatever you're buying though is going to be theirs. That's the only thing. What I have to, what we can do. So I said on the screen that the threat can be neutralized because that UCC, the Uniform Commercial Code, is a state law that we've adopted. So state lawmakers, we can change that. So really what I've got to do, Jenny, is I've got to get with a lawmaker and get them up to speed.
Yeah.
And get with these guys that have, which let me put this up here. This is really the only thing that I would ask people to go out and read. It's only a couple pages. So you need to just search this up, the Heartland Institute Protecting Private Property Through Uniform Commercial Code.
I'll add that to our article.
Yeah. That's going to basically tell us everything we need to know. So I just need to get a legislator up to speed so we can write, get some bill written and start the process. And all we're going to need, Jenny, is in the past, what happened at South Dakota and what happened at Tennessee was the single guy, David Webb, he got a bill written, went through committee. When it went to the floor, literally the thing that happened to him. So the banking lobby came in, but no one showed up. Okay. No. Yeah. He said there's less than 5 total people you can count on a single hand that actually showed up as people just to say, yes, protect this thing, change this law. So if I can just get with someone, get a bill written, all we're going to need is just people to show up, call, do the work to say, this is highly important. Because
I think what we need to do more than anything is get with the legislator and get them to ask for an interim study on this. Because if we got the right legislator to run an interim study and they ran the interim study, I think we could probably do a pretty good job informing people of that and then going back like Tom Gann did, with the flock camera thing. I think that's kind of what we need to do. Seriously though, that's not 100%, such a nice word, entitlement. Good grief. The setting up for quadrant living is ever more pressing. An entitlement owned by BlackRock. I had a banker tell me the FDIC is bogus to make people feel good about putting their monies in a bank and have the thoughts of not losing their monies. Then he went on to explain how nothing is covered in any one name or account over $100,000, which a lot of people don't understand. And then this was a really, Steph, she's awfully insightful. So they make the changes and then they test it during 9/11, or am I wrong?
No, and actually, in fact, 2 of the major pieces of that UCC code came through under George Bush, under W.
Yeah, I'm not surprised.
The initial deal was literally done right at the end of Clinton, and then George W. put in 2, and then by the time, let's say probably 2003, 2004. Kind of around that time. At that point, that's when every single state had adopted that UCC code that was put in.
Yeah. So what about Army retirements? What about government pensions? Same
I
thing.
don't think it matters.
Okay.
I mean, the government pensions are tied to the stock market, so those assets are not. They're not
independent.
Yeah.
Debt is data control. So we talked about that. And we talked about that. Hold it never in safety deposit box. That's not yours either. That's a good point, Steph. Anything the bank has is their asset. So no, I don't have a safety deposit box either. Just don't keep one. I don't want it in there. And you know what's sad is, I look at my mom who had some significant assets, and she had, some of them in a bank, security box. And if I had told her then, hey mom, if the bank goes under, they can take your stuff and keep it and auction it off for their debts, she would say, no, that would never happen, because that generation, I think is a part of the problem, right? I mean, they were brought up under, World War II, Vietnam, they saw all this stuff happening. They saw government as a helper figure, as a good thing. They were propagandized under that USA, indivisible kind of a thing. And oh, thanks. It was Caldwell. Thank you, Suzanne. You are correct. Caldwell was the one I was raging at the other day. Oh, okay. Silicon Valley Bank and First
Silicon
Republic
Valley and
Bank.
First Republic. That's
our
it. Thank you,
Californian
Lisa.
right there. She would know.
Yep.
But that button won't eliminate ours. Our data will survive their manufacturing. Oh, that's a really good point too, Becky. That's true. I mean, it's always against, oh, I'll never forget that one actress who was on Disney Plus channel. It was that new Star Wars about the little green guy. And she posted during the Trump administration, she posted something on her Instagram, which was a picture. It was a cartoon that was done in like 1925 or 30. I mean, it wasn't recent by any stretch of the imagination. And it's a bunch of people who are bent over, like, so these are their legs and their backs are bent over like this. And so they're like this. And then a table is on the top of them, a tabletop. And then sitting around them are all the elites. And then the caption was, if you stand up, right? And she was fired over that, and it just kills me, because they don't want you to know that you have the power to make it stop. But if you unplug, or you think to yourself, oh my God, I'm so scared now that Michael just said that, I don't know what to do. I'm just not going to think about it. Right. So you do that, and then nothing changes, and they count on you doing that. They count on you having your head blown and you going, no, that can't be. That's not the United States. I know. Right. I mean, they count on our ignorance and our lack of desire to do anything about what we find out. Right.
Correct.
So, derivatives are 4 quadrillion.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, if you look at global derivatives, I mean, it is mind-blowing.
Oh, he's saying global derivatives are 4 quadrillion.
Yeah, I believe
Is that
it.
even actually
a number?
Yeah. Is that a number, really?
Yeah. I would believe it. Well, I showed look
so that would be 4 trillion. No.
That'd be another. Yeah, on top of a trillion, that's another 3 zeros. That's a quadrillion on top of a trillion.
God alive. That's just crazy. I hear good things about Old Glory Bank. I don't know. There might be a couple out there that are unplugged. Go, Michael, go. The problem is getting other state lawmakers to go along with few wanting change for the people. And that, honestly, Steph, that's the problem. That's what we're dealing with right now during this legislative session, which is just, it is this legislative session. I'll say it again. I'll keep saying it. We are getting screwed by the people that are sitting up there. There are 20 that are in our corner. Everybody else is in the lobbyist corner. It's just kind of like BlackRock, shows up and says, no, you can't. The BlackRock lobbyist, who is also the green agenda lobbyist, Mark Yates, shows up and says, no, we're not going to do this. We can't do that. And then they all go, okay. It doesn't matter. What's their only job, Michael? What is those people? What's their only job?
Protect our liberty.
That's their only job. They
Yeah.
can't even do their only job.
Yeah. Hey, I found that FDIC video if you want to play it. It's about 3 minutes.
Oh, yeah. Hold on one second. State can change the tables with just a simple word change in the law, which needs to get done. Yes, it may be theirs, but I wouldn't have bought it outright and will have lost less when on a loan than buying it outright with the cash. And I hate to say that, but there's some, it's like, if you're going to screw me, I'll screw you back. I don't know. That's awesome. Forthright. Michael, wishing you lots of luck on that. That doesn't, Becky, that sounds a little, the phrase that I just can't, passive aggressive. Yes, they may on the asset, but on that loan, sorry, already did that one. Banks own everyone credit, and when they use lies and blackmail, they win. Again, BlackRock, who is looking to invest in the Panama Canal for sure. Everybody needs to search the great taking, which is what you brought up.
On that, not just the great taking, but so there's the book, yes, which you can go to thegreattaking.com. You can just download that book. There is a documentary of the great taking on YouTube, but there's also the counter part of that, which is called Stop It, the Great Taking. And that's where I haven't watched that yet, but I saw it when I was kind of going through some stuff. So that's where they've got the people and they're talking to the legislators. They're talking about how we stop this deal. So that'll be my next deal. I'm going to dive into that pretty deep so we can kind of get up to speed.
Good. Okay, excellent. Yes, boomer generation has been largely complacent and complicit. And it's sad because my dad, like when I talk to my dad, because my dad's still living, when I talk to my dad, I can only talk to my mom in heaven now. But when I talk to my dad and I tell him about some of this stuff, he just, he understands it, but I think there's a part of him that can't grasp the fact that this would happen in his country. It's just like, how would this actually happen? I think it's so hard for them to believe that it may not even be complacent. It's just, I don't know. It's not like, it's kind of almost like not believing stuff your parents told you, it's losing trust in your parents. It's, I guess, kind of. Old Glory Bank is not tied to the world banks in any way. I don't know anything about that, but I'll look that one up. Legislators need to have backbones for the people, not for lobbyists. And yes, of course, that's true. 4 quadrillion is definitely a number. My vacuum picks up 4 quadrillion here. So you must have the same problem I have. And then we've got a couple of loves and the Twilight Zone. Not sure what happened to Michael. He may have had to take a phone call, but I do think that we have to get to where did you go?
I had to get a call real quick.
Okay, I was afraid of that. Okay, so we're at the end of the comments, and you wanted to say something else before we got off of here today. Oh, the FDIC thing. Yes, go.
We're not going to watch the whole thing. We'll just watch the first minute or so because that's really all you need to see.
Okay.
Okay. So this is our good old boys here, the FDIC.
Accessible when people need to know, but I don't think you have much hope of reaching a public that doesn't have a professional need to know.
I completely agree with that. I almost think you'd scare the public if you put this out. Like, why are they telling me this? Should I be concerned about my bank? Like my insurance company doesn't tell me what they're doing with my assets. They just assume they're going to pay my claim. Right? I think you've got to think of the unintended consequences of taking a public that has more full faith and confidence in the banking system than maybe people in this room do. That we want them to have full faith and confidence in the banking system. They know the FDIC insurance is there. They know it works. They put their money in, they're going to get their money out. So there's a select crowd of people that are in the institutional side. And if they want to understand this, they're going to find a way to understand this. There's a bunch of law firms represented in this room. There's a bunch of people that charge them by the hour a lot of money to explain this all to them. And it's fine. I don't have a problem with that. And they all have huge staffs. But I would be careful about the unintended consequences of starting to blast too much of this out in the general public.
I wondered whether there are some market tests of whether you're being heard. And I think about TLAC. So TLAC should respond to good and bad news about the institutions. And it's really important. I mean, it's a little bit conflicted, right? I mean, it's important that people understand they can be bailed in, but you don't want a huge run on the institution. But they're going to be. And it could be an early warning signal to the FDIC and the primary regulators when these things happen. And there may be some other prices. This is similar to what Jay was saying in the market that you can tell whether people understand who's going to be protected, who isn't going to be protected. It would be, I think, an interesting study to look at the evolution of market prices in.
All right. That's
Becky was being sincere. I'm sorry, Becky. I wasn't trying to put you down. It was just the way you said that. And I thought, because we have so little control over, anything right now. Amber said, my folks won't even allow the conversation. They've always tried to make me sit down. No, it did not work. The good old, we can't tell the public, they might panic line. Thanks for the protection, guys.
Yeah, I mean, they say it, clear as day in there. You're going to be bailed in. They're not just talking about your cash.
Yeah.
They're talking about all your assets. You're going to be bailed in because there's people that are the secured creditors up there, and it's not us.
Yeah.
An uninformed public. That's what he calls it. You don't want to tell an uninformed public. I'm telling you, if people have any, and we need to get on a legislator, get that interim study, and I'll get a hold of David Webb, bring him to, I'll bring him to Oklahoma so he can go into that.
I thought about the Heartland guy too, the guy who wrote the article in Heartland. I thought, I think we could probably really scare up some good presenters, for that kind of a thing. But if we can't get rid of our property taxes and you're not going to allow us to have the investments that we've had, then basically I don't know how you get around that you'll have nothing and be happy about it and eat bugs like we tell you. I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't see that there's any, I don't know. This is interesting. And Steph says, I'm in delay mode, 4 minutes, a plug for the boomers. I'm one, and it's hard to break 60 plus years of programming. And, I get it. I'm on the tail end of, the boomer generation. But for some reason, God just made me, super independent. And so I started thinking about this, a long time ago. And then just really had it smacked, had it smacked me in the face and during COVID. And I remember thinking during COVID, I was like, oh my gosh, that's like the whole thing. Like, this is it. This is
Here's another not scary part, but let's say there is some kind of crash. Let's say at some level, let's say not everything gets wiped out. They don't take everything. Let's say just some stuff from whoever they decide. Maybe you have these big banks that want to just take out the rest of the banks to where there's only 2 or 3 banks and that's it. 3 or 4 banks. There is no more other banks. But if we have any kind of crash, Jenny, where's the majority of everybody else's wealth that they have right now? Probably in their house value. You have any kind of crash, these house values are going to go down to,
right down the toilet.
unbelievable amounts. I mean, the value of your house is so overinflated because of that printing of trillions of dollars on a screen. It's all connected.
Yeah. John says, well, you can't be a boomer if you're going to whine to us about how offended you. John. Michael, when are you opening up your t-shirt merch store? We need to make some money to fly in some experts and help us change the laws in Oklahoma. You know what, Michael? We need to, after we get off of here, we need to talk about something like that. So let's do that. Put a pin in it. I think it also makes a difference where boomers were raised to in their life experiences and how quickly they're waking up. My folks grew up in Oregon and they're there to this day. And I would agree with that. We will lose our homes. They're owned by the banks unless, and I still want to see how it is that if my house is paid off, it's leveraged by a bank. I want to know the answer to that question because, Tosley really upset me when he said he tried to get the deed and couldn't get it. And I'm calling the county today. I'm going to get off of here and go, I want to know where my deed is to my house.
Well, we need to clarify that. Well, I mean, we actually do need to clarify that.
Yeah. It's not funny. A good sense of humor is great. But his financialization of the world has gone too far. And that's, I would agree with that. I mean, it isn't funny. I mean,
well, and here's
none of this. I mean, my argument is none of this is funny. But I also know too, because don't forget, I've been in this a long time when other people have gotten out or quit or whatever. And if you don't give yourself if you stew on this all the time, I don't think God wants you to live a miserable life. I really do not believe that. I don't. I mean, I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm not saying that we aren't supposed to, die for our faith, but I'm saying day in and day out, I don't believe that our God wants us to be miserable. So we have to have some kind of, levity, brevity, whatever you want to call it, to give our brains a chance to recoup and move on, because I know what happens when you get too deep in this and some of the realizations as to how deep it is hit you. And I don't think that's where we need to be either.
Who knows the timing of this deal? It may not be imminent. It may be 5 or 10 years down the road. But also in the meantime, one other aspect to that financialization comment.
Yeah.
Yes, we're massively financialized across the board. But guess what? With the digital age and now the crypto side, everything that was financial and everything that actually is an asset is going to be tokenized also. So that is going to go on overdrive when the new money system in one way or another comes into existence.
Well, but I don't want to, I mean, to me, that sounds fatalistic when it does. I mean, we have the ability to make it stop should we decide to stand up, right?
Well,
the
we
table
can at least
breaks
stop
if we stand up.
We can stop it in Oklahoma. We can stop it in Oklahoma.
Okay, this is funny. Jenny's to-do list for today: get deed, start Michael's merch shop. Those are way down on the list of my to-dos, but you're correct. We didn't touch Gracie's comment, and that's concerning. Even if your house is paid off, the county still owns it through taxes. And I guess I hadn't, put the two together, because then what Tosley said earlier, and I don't know how you pronounce it, but what he said earlier was when he went to get the deed, he said he couldn't because they have it in as backup or payment or whatever.
It's collateral for the taxes.
Yeah. So when did not getting the deed change? I have an old deed of my great grandparents in Missouri that they paid off. Property sold to someone else nowadays. I would imagine it was just kind of the same thing that happened.
Recent. All this
Yeah.
stuff with the UCC is very
Yeah.
recent. I mean, it's within the last 15 years.
Yeah, and it's when these companies figured out that we're making ourselves ignorant. We're specifically and personally ignorant and wanting to be so, because we don't want to deal with it, or we don't know how to deal with it. So we're just becoming ignorant. And that's exactly what the problem is. They've realized that we're doing this, and we won't show up at these things. We won't show up at the state capitol. We won't do, blah, blah, blah. We won't do these other things. And that's a good question, Becky. Could our land be taken because the mineral rights we don't own are tied to a company's collateral? And that's a scary freaking question.
Those are all things that, like, an interim study has got to evaluate.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because we have that split of mineral and land. So what if the mineral rights are collateral in a corporation that is going, has a financial product?
Yeah. And Gracie says it's all just stuff. You can't take it with you, but dang it, if you pay for it, you should be able to control it. You should have control of it. And I agree with that. Because some of us want to leave something for a little something for our kids. It's changed so much for worse in the last 50 years. I'm 62. To stop and think about it. I'm in my 63rd year, but the number is actually 2. And I think about just how bad it's come since the 80s. Because Dave and I actually started getting involved in politics on some level in the early 90s and paying attention. And I know for a fact how bad it is just in the last even 20 years. I mean, it's like the entropy thing that we talked about. Entropy is that force of nature in which once you get to a tipping point, it doesn't just gradually slide. It just, falls off. I mean, entropy is a bad deal. And I think we're suffering it. Companies, possessive, not plural. Government and NGOs removing personal rights and liberties under our noses. It's true. And, the Rockefeller Foundation started that in the 20s and the teens.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Those are the same great-grandparents had money hidden in the walls of the house. The money was found when they died. They understood, and a generation went to sleep on all of this. And it's and we'll probably need to shut down comments for now because we're at 2 hours. But I do appreciate everybody who's been on and making the comments, because this is depressing. It's concerning. It's frustrating. But one other verb, it's motivating. And I'll chop this thing down so that people can, really see what's going on here. And do believe that Michael and I will be working on something in the background, on this, for sure. But you guys have, again, and I do this every podcast, both you and I do it, Michael. We have to share these things. Even if it's with people that you think aren't going to listen, you've got to share these things. If you don't want to share the video, that's fine. Just talk to them about it. Hey, did you know XYZ? I mean, until we start waking more people up, not enough of us are awakened. So on Monday, we're going to have such a fun interview. Trent Luce is going to be with us. He has his own radio program. He is from the Great West, actually the Great Northwest, not Oregon, Nebraska. And he's going to be actually at the South Tulsa Republicans meeting at 9 a.m. I'll put up the event so that you guys can see it. He's going to be there on Monday, and then we'll have him on the program on Wednesday. He's a very anti-green guy, and we're going to talk about carbon capture and some other stuff that's going on with him. And then on Friday, we have an awesome show because we're going to have legislators with us on Friday. We're going to have Jim Shaw at 9, and we're going to have Gabe Woolley at 1. And we're going to talk to these guys, these good guys, a little bit about what they think. John says Trent is sharp. Yes, Trent is very sharp. And that doesn't mean he has a pointy head. He's very sharp. And so we'll have a great program coming up next week. So just stay tuned, share. Have a great weekend. Stay out of the rain. Anything else, Michael?
It's up to us.
It's up to us.
We can take our state back. We can take our local school boards back, our local politics, all these, everything. We can do it.
Got to stand up. Have a great weekend. Have a blessed Easter Sunday.
Yeah.
Remember today, Good Friday, and how Jesus died on the cross for our sins. If you're not a believer, please take some time, go to the Bible, read John 3:16, and then I would read the entire book of John in the New Testament, and I bet you come out a new person. So have a great weekend, remembering Jesus and being with your family, and we'll see you again on Wednesday. God bless.